under difficult circumstances and reelected and is governing and succeeding. And so I hope that I get your support tonight. Last thing is, don't let the pundits or anybody else tell you who you're supposed to vote for. There is no wasted vote tonight if you're voting for someone who you believe in your heart and your mind is the best person to be president, because you may give them an extra boost with your vote out of Iowa to New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada, and then Super Tuesday. The election doesn't end here tonight, it just begins. And vote for the person who you think is the best person to beat Hillary Clinton and the best person to be able to bring our country back to a sense of security and safety and prosperity. And I hope I get your vote tonight. So I'm going to end there and let you ask me questions, because that'll be the more entertaining part of the program, I can guarantee you. So who has questions for me about anything? Yes, sir.
What would President Christie set as an agenda in the first 100 days of the Oval Office?
Yep, everybody loves these 100-day things, right? It would be the things that I spent the most time talking about. First would be restoring our national and homeland security by increasing funding for our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agencies, and restoring some of the authority that was taken away from them this summer to be able to connect the dots and get things done in that way. Second would be to send our tax reform, both individual and corporate tax reform package, to Capitol Hill. Push that, because restoring economic growth is going to be an important part. Third, I would be working on the regulatory reform that we can do inside the executive branch. I'd sign as my first executive order the freezing of any new regulation from any department or agency of the federal government for 180 days. Then send my vice president out on the road to meet with businesses all across the country to find out which regulations that had been imposed upon them in the last 8 years were the most onerous, the most expensive, and the most ridiculous. And then bring those back to be repealed by the President of the United States. Fourth and finally, I would call the President of Mexico, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, and the Prime Minister of Israel, and invite each one of them to come and visit me privately at the White House inside the first 100 days. The first hour or two would be for them to vent about the ways they had been mistreated over the course of the last 8 years. And then I'd ask them to lay out for me what their vision is for their country's future and how America could play a role in that, and I would lay out that for them so we could begin to rebuild our alliances. With rebuilt alliances, we can play a stronger role in the world, and the world can be more peaceful. Those would be the 4 things in the first 100 days. If I got all that done in the first 100 days, I'd definitely take a day off.
I believe electing a Republican president is critical, but I also don't think every attorney gold wants to do that. Iowa House last year passed a call for an Article 5 convention in states for your thoughts.
I'm not for that at the moment. I want to elect a Republican president first and see what a Republican president can do with a Republican Congress. And if the Congress remains recalcitrant and won't do things, then that's something I'd consider. But let's give it 2 years of a Republican president if we have a Republican Congress. Let's give it 2 years and see what we can get done together. Then you'll give us the verdict at the midterm, and then I think it'll be pretty obvious as to whether we need to go that route or not. Yes, sir.
Governor, thank you for taking the time to be with a lot of young people today. Social Security is an issue that's important to me as a young person, 30 years away from ever seeing anything, if we ever see anything. Do you have some thoughts on what you might do for a plan to at least preserve it for young people like us?
Yep, I'm the only person in this race with a detailed entitlement reform plan. So I won't give you all 12 points because I want you to be able to eat your lunch, but I'll give you 4. And go to my website tonight before you go to caucus, to chrischristie.com. It is the only plan. No one else has put forward an entitlement reform. But Donald Trump's entitlement reform plan is he said that everyone's going to get so rich when he's president we won't have to worry about Social Security. I'm not against that, by the way, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Here's what I do. On Social Security, we need to raise the retirement age. We need to raise it 2 years and phase it in over 25 years. That's going to affect you. It'll affect me less, but it'll help from an actuarial perspective to get us on sounder ground, because the average life expectancy of a woman in America now is 83. The average life expectancy of a man is 79. And so having a program where you're spending a decade and a half on retirement needs to be pared down. We have to do that. Second, I want to means test Social Security because we have an imbalance in Social Security. Here's what I mean by means testing it. If you make $200,000 a year or more in retirement income, it means you got $4 or $5 million bucks put away. First thing I'll say to you is God bless you. Good work. Right? God bless America. It's the only country you could have done it in. But you're making $200,000 a year in retirement income. Do you really need a $1,200 a month Social Security check? Is it really going to make a difference in your lifestyle? I say no, and I wouldn't give you one. And the fact of the matter is, I know that you put money into it. You're paying into it now. I'm paying into it now. But that money, given that it was stolen by the federal government, beginning in the 1960s and continuing all the way through to this last Congress, the trust fund has nothing but IOUs in it. So when we have a checkbook imbalancing problem, you either got to pay out less or take in more. Hillary Clinton will tell you to take the cap off the Social Security tax. Take in more money. Certainly a credible way of doing it. I say pay less to these people on the back end. Why do I think my plan is better? Because let's look at it this way. Let's say that somebody opened up a new bank here in Des Moines next week and you deposited a bunch of your money in it. And then a year from now, the bank went belly up and you lost some of your money. Let's say that 6 months later, you get a knock on your front door. And the guy's there and he says, "Hi, I'm opening up a new bank in Des Moines. I wonder if I might be able to solicit some of your deposits." And you go, "Hey, you look like the guy who ran the bank that opened 18 months ago that went belly up. Like, are you that guy?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, but don't worry, I've learned." You would not give that guy a nickel of your money. So why are you giving the federal government more of your money? Why would you do it? They stole from you already. They stole from you. And by the way, they'll do it again. Because if they have three choices, raise taxes, cut spending, or behind door number 3, we have a pile of money that nobody's really watching that I can take and not anger anybody at the moment. And when they do get angry, I'll be gone. Congress will take door number 3. So that's why I believe paying out less at the end, which goes at the same people. It's people who have been well off and done well in this country. That going after spending less is much better than going after taxing more. I do the same thing on Medicare, by the way. Raise the eligibility age 2 years, phase it in over 25, and lower the premium subsidy for folks who make $200,000 a year or more from 75% to 10%, because you can afford to pay more. But we should not let Social Security, which will go insolvent in 7 years if we do nothing, we should not let those people who that check will make the difference between rent and heat and food, we shouldn't let them suffer. They played by the rules, they paid into the system. And I know it's unfair, because so are we. You know, my 22-year-old son, a couple years ago when he got his first real summer job in college, he came home with his first pay stub. He's like, "What's this FICA thing?" I'm like, "You'll learn, dude, you'll learn." So, yes, sir.
And kind of related to that is the Medicare bankrupting the country as well. They've always been bankrupt the country. These are two of the major ones. Can you just talk a little bit about Medicare and how we're going to reform that whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's those 2 points, okay? Those are the 2 major points. Raise eligibility age and lower the subsidies. Make people put more money into the system. In that sense, that's what I would do. Lower the subsidies, raise eligibility age. And that's what I would do on those. I think there are other deeper reforms that we need to do to Medicaid, which involve a lot more freedom for the states to make choices. But that's in the plan, in the 12-point plan. Go to the website and take a look at it. I start going over the Medicaid changes now. You will definitely glaze over. But, yes, sir.
So at the Waukee event a couple weeks ago, you talked about debt and deficits. This is a topic that really hasn't gotten a lot of airtime this election cycle. But can you talk a little bit about, and you said, the problem obviously is not going to be solved even in 2 terms of the Christie administration. But we just talked about 2 major drivers of that. How else do you, besides those 2 reform acts, do you see addressing both debt and deficit?
Well, long-term debt has to be addressed both by those kind of changes. I'll talk about some other changes I want to make, and growth. You saw last quarter, we got 0.7% economic growth. I mean, we've got to get to 3% or higher in economic growth to start to whittle away at that debt. It's the only way we're going to do it. We're not going to just cut our way out of the debt. We also have to grow our way out of it too. It has to be like an accordion. We have to push it from both sides. I also will give you an analogy of what I did in New Jersey for what I'll do in the federal government. I came in with an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. So when you come into that situation, what did we do? We sat down, and over 6 weeks, I went through every line of the budget. 3 meetings a week for 6 weeks. And I cut 800 programs. Now, every one of those programs had a constituency, let me guarantee you. They didn't wind up in the budget because they didn't. And the problem with that is that you hear from everybody, emails, phone calls, letters, protests, but you got to just put your blinders on. And I am sure that there are at least 800 programs to be cut in the federal government, if not more. So we have to do that. Entitlements, though, is the big driver. 71% of all federal spending today are on entitlements and debt service. So we can do everything we want to do on the 29%. It is a fraction. We got to go after the 71%, and that's where we need to spend the money, both in current deficit and also in long-term debt. But we'll do the cutting that we have to do on others. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good.
Gene Mitchell. I just want to say, first of all, as a United States Marine Corps veteran, I want to thank you for your public service.
Thank you, sir. You too.
I also want to ask you a question. You said that you want to prosecute Hillary Clinton, which I totally look forward to seeing that. But my question to you is she's going to make the same case against you that you should also be prosecuted. What credibility do you bring to prosecuting?
Yeah, well, here's the difference. I've been investigated 3 different times, twice led by Democrats. Believe me, man, they had something on me. They would have gotten me a long time ago. This is now a 2-year-old problem, not something that we're just learning in the midst of a presidential campaign. So if Secretary Clinton wants to, make that case, I'm happy to let her make it. Happy to let her try and make it, because she's not going to be able to. Her Democratic friends, encouraged by her, have already tried to over the last 2 years. And what they found was that I had nothing to do with any of that and had no knowledge of it. And so if she wants to make that case, go ahead. But I'll tell you this, even if she could prove something on that, which she can't, it's a traffic jam. Okay? It's not sacrificing national security secrets on a private server in your basement for your convenience. It's not putting at risk intelligence officers' lives because we're not protecting classified information. It's not instructing your staff to remove headers off of classified documents and then sending them over non-secure faxes because it's convenient for you. And it's not lying to the American people when you said there was no classified information on your server and it turns out there was. It's not lying to the American people when you say it wasn't marked classified information when it turns out not only was it marked, but you were asking for the markings to be taken off. She wants to have that fight on the stage in front of 100 million Americans. Bring it on. I'm happy to. Yes, ma'am.
What would you do to continue to support innovation in healthcare and help us continue to invent new cures?
We have to drastically increase this funding for the National Institutes of Health. This year, the National Institutes of Health funding has gone up 0.1%. Fact is, the NIH can partner with the private sector, with our pharmaceutical companies, to drive enormous growth in both treatments and cures. And it's going to be cost effective for us because we spend, he talked about Medicare before. In Medicare and Medicaid, 75% of all Medicare and Medicaid spending occurs in the last 3 years of people's lives. If we can go after the big 4 diseases that cause most of that spending, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, and get more effective treatments and cures for those diseases, the money we invest now will seem like nothing compared to the money we will save on the back end, not to mention how we'll increase the quality of people's lives. So I'm a big advocate of increased NIH funding. I think it's really important and something that would be a priority in my administration because it not only will improve quality of life, it will also save us money at end of life as well and help the problems we have in Medicare and Medicaid. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Higher education. Student debt's a problem, probably for a lot of people in this room, my wife and I included. We're in this room though, we don't want a handout. We could be in a different room in this town right now if we did. What can be done for our 1.5-year-old over the next several years so he doesn't face the same level?
Listen, there are 4 things that I've talked about on higher ed reform. The first one is that we've got to allow folks to refinance their student loans. It's obscene that you lock in your rate and you can't refinance. We should not be making money off of our young people. So you should be able to refinance your loans to lower your carrying costs. Second, I think national service should be an option for folks when they leave college with significant debt. And I don't mean just military service, I mean national service of all kinds. And get credit every year that you serve in national service for reduction of your debt. There are a lot of things that need to be done in this country, and there's a lot of people who would like to see that there's something bigger than their own self-interest. And in return, if we lower their debt as a result of their service, we can then let them go out into the job market when they're done with their national service and follow their heart in terms of what they want to do, not just worry about how much money they need to make in order to be able to cover their monthly student debt payment. So that's on the student debt side. But we got to go after the college cost side because that's what's really driving this. I'll tell you, we have 2 children in college right now. Our oldest son is a senior at Princeton. Our oldest daughter is a sophomore at Notre Dame. So that total cost this year is $122,500 between the 2 schools. And so I feel the pain that you're going to feel. I'm feeling it right now, buddy. And I got a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old chasing up behind. So it's not going to end anytime soon. Here's the problem. This summer I got a letter from Notre Dame to the parents, from Father Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame. And first paragraph of the letter is great, right? It says, "We want to thank you for giving us the blessing of entrusting the souls of your children to our care for their education over the next number of years." Now, this is from a Catholic priest, right? So, by the time you get done, you close your eyes, you can hear the theme from Rudy in the background. Right? You can see the Golden Dome and Touchdown Jesus, right? The whole thing, you're feeling it, the heart's pumping. Anybody who's a Catholic in this room, as I am, knows the next paragraph is the money paragraph. That's when they come to get your money. So he tells me in the next paragraph that he's so pleased to tell me that tuition is only going to go up 3.9% this year. And that's the lowest annual increase at Notre Dame in 40 years. Now, let's say we made this decision like we make every other decision in our life. You make an evaluation of relative value to cost and decide whether to make the expenditure or not. I might decide at $62,500 a year that Notre Dame is no longer a value. Now, all of you in this room are closer, almost all of you in this room are closer to being a 19-year-old than to having a 19-year-old. But having a 19-year-old daughter, let me tell you what I think would happen if I called her downstairs and said, "You know what, I know you love Notre Dame and everything, and you're having a great time there, and it's a great education, but I don't think it's a value anymore, so we're going to send you to X school, which is significantly less." After the crying, the stamping of the feet, the slamming of the door, and the "I hate you and you're ruining my life," basically what would happen would be Mary Pat and I would sit around the table and figure out how we're going to afford to be able to send her back. Because what you want for your children, and you'll find this with your 1.5-year-old, by the time they get to 18, what you want more than anything in their lives is for them to get a great education and to be happy. And she's doing both those things at Notre Dame. Here's the problem. The colleges and universities know that too. They know I'm not making a logical decision. They know I'm making an emotional one. And so when you're making an emotional decision, they can charge you whatever your emotion will bear. So how do we put market forces on what is almost exclusively an emotional decision? I have two ideas. Idea number one is make them detail for you everything they're spending with your money. So right now, I just paid the Princeton bill 3 weeks ago. It's 3 lines. Tuition, room and board, other fees. $29,750. If you went to a restaurant in Des Moines tonight, say you went over to the 801, so you're not going to get a cheap meal, right? You go over to the 801, and you went with a couple of friends, and they threw a check down at the end of the night that said food, $300. Right? You'd call the waiter over and go, "Hey, dude, come here for a second, would you? Would you detail on here everything that we had and everything we had to drink and how much it all costs so we know?" For a college bill, we don't ask. We just pay it. We take it on faith. We can't. Because if they detailed what they're spending this money on, we'd be outraged and they'd be embarrassed. Because there is a ton of waste going on in higher education, a ton of expenditure that's meant only to enhance someone's ego, a ton of empire building in these places. So we need to make them detail it so that we can force that conversation. Because once it's in the light, the conversation will occur. As long as we let them keep it in the dark, the conversation will never occur. Second, and kind of conjoined with that, is you should be able to unbundle your bill. So here are the things and how much they cost. I'm checking off the things that my kid's going to use. And that's all I'm paying for, is the stuff that my kid's going to use. The classes my kids are going to take, the backup stuff that they're going to use there, whether it's extracurricular, co-curricular activities, whatever it is they're going to use, I'll check it off and I'll pay for that. But I'm not paying for everything else. That's the only way we can put a market force on this, right? Because that'll be a market test. If 98% of the people pay for a particular item, all right, you know that that's a fairly popular, market-driven, needed item. If only 4% of the people pay for the rock climbing wall, you probably can skip the rock climbing wall, right? So, that's, and they say the last thing you should ask me is, how am I going to do that? The way I would do it, those last two things, is to say, if you don't do those two things, you cannot participate in the federal student loan or federal student grant program. You're going to use taxpayer money, you got to tell us this information. And believe me, that'll get their attention because that's a lot of money. And if your school can't have kids who use the federal student loans or the federal student grants, you've narrowed your target audience significantly. Those are, I think, the best ideas in terms of trying to bring some measure of control to cost, and then trying to deal with the debt that's there now and giving you options about how to lower the cost or eliminate part of that debt through other options. So that's what I would do. Other questions from anybody? Yes, sir.
What's your take, us being in the Midwest, we have our opinions about the Second Amendment, gun rights, all that stuff. You being from the East Coast might have something different. Could you elaborate on that, what you think or what the plans are for that future?
Yeah, I don't think we have any significant differences from my perspective. Listen, I think that what we need to focus our time on is putting criminals who use guns in jail and not worrying about making up new laws for law-abiding citizens. Because you know what? You want to add further restrictions to purchasing a gun, it's not going to do anything to stop a criminal. Because they don't go to Walmart and buy their gun with a background check and a 48-hour waiting period. They buy it on the black market. They chisel off the serial number. They use it. When it gets too hot, they drop it and they pick up another one. It's just the way it works. And I saw this for 7 years as a prosecutor. What really convinced me on Second Amendment was my 7 years as a prosecutor, is that a lot of these laws just don't work. And what really works is prosecuting criminals and getting them who are using guns off the street. And for the rest of the folks in this country, the Second Amendment means something. So if you're a law-abiding citizen and you go through the background check and all the rest, you have a right to own that gun. And whether it's for self-defense or whether it's for hunting or whether it's for collecting, should not be the government's business. As long as you're following the law, you should be able to follow your constitutional rights as well. And that's be my position as president. It'd be nice, because in New Jersey, it's a tough atmosphere for these rights. I have a Democratic legislature who's sending me crazy stuff like every session that I veto. But it'd be nice to get on offense on this issue when you're president. It'd be a nice switch for me. Other questions for anybody about anything? They tell me I can take one more question. All right.
This is a question, I guess it might come from a position of jealousy, but right now we have a president who doesn't really go to church, but then kind of uses it as a shield when it serves its purpose. He likes to spend his Christmas vacations in Hawaii, and I guess I was just curious, what are your hobbies? Where do you like to take family vacations? Are there places that you haven't been but will start going when you're president?
Yeah. Well, I assume for the job, I'll probably go to a lot of places I haven't been. But let's narrow it down. For vacations, I mean, most of our vacations have been spent at the Jersey Shore during my lifetime. And, I don't know whether the Jersey Shore would be prepared for President Christie to come down there and head to the restaurants and the boardwalk and see Snooki in the situation. But, who knows? Might be. And when we do other vacations, it's more to show our kids other parts of the country. So, 2 years ago, we did a summer trip where we drove the state of California. We started in San Diego and we ended up in San Francisco and did a number of things in between. We did a whole Midwest trip one year as a family. I did a baseball trip with the boys where we started at Wrigley Field and made our way all the way back to Citi Field in New York and stopped at a bunch of stadiums in between. My point is, my hobby is my children. Our children are our hobby. They're also our passion. But when I have free time from my job currently as governor, or I have free time as president, I suspect what I'll be doing immediately is trying to figure out where I can induce my children to actually come and be with me. Right? Because they're getting older, right? They're 22 and 19 now. They're going to wind up being married at some point, I suspect, and the younger ones by that time will be going to college. And so you got to make this attractive for them. It can't just be like, I mean, hopefully the White House will be somewhat attractive for them to come, but I'm sure like anything else, like they'll get used to that too. That's what I like to spend most of my free time doing, is spending time with my kids. They all play sports. My son plays baseball at Princeton. This is his senior season, so this campaign continues and I continue to do well. I probably won't see a whole lot of his games, which will be a bummer for me because I'd love to see him play this year. My other children play basketball and play hockey. And so I spend a lot of time at sporting events and watching them play and trying to just be another father sitting in the stands and watching what's going on and yelling at the referees and all that. And then if I actually really have quiet time to myself, The two things that I probably do the most is read. I love biographies, and I'll read biographies when I have free time. And then I love watching sports on TV. So like anybody else, like, you know, who is a sports fan, if there's something good on, you know, I'll try to take that time at night when I have a little bit of time just to watch some baseball or watch some football and enjoy myself and just not think about anything else. Super Bowl prediction? You know, I mean, I'm really rooting for the Broncos. I'd love to see Peyton Manning win and retire as a Super Bowl champion. That would be a great story. But I have a sneaking sense that Carolina is the better team. So my heart is saying Denver, but my head is saying Carolina.
And then if president, would you continue to fill out a March Madness bracket? It's very important.
Listen, we fill out March Madness brackets as a family, and it's all like family bragging rights, right? So I have 4 children, me and Mary Pat, and we fill out those brackets, and it is intense. Everybody's got their brackets. They're counting after the first round, after the second round, who's got the most points. And there's no money involved. There's no like dinner or prize. It is just the ability to mock other people in your family. Like when they have a particularly bad half of the bracket, right? And you go, 12 points? 12 points on that side of the, you are awful, right? I mean, that's the best part. You sit at dinner that night with each other and just kill each other over it and enjoy that. So yeah, I can't imagine that we would ever stop filling out a bracket, especially inside the family, because again, the mocking aspect of it is just too tempting for us to let go. So I'm going to let you go back to doing what you do. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Carson is here. I didn't just see her. Now, Mrs. Carson and I have been in a couple places together today. Dr. Carson's wife is here. And I said this before an event that we were at this morning at the Machine Shed. There's lots of very stressful things that go into running for president. One of the really good sidelights that you never really think about when you decide to do it is that you wind up meeting a lot of people that you would have never met before. On the campaign trail, lots of folks, but also the people that you're running against. I didn't know Ben Carson before this summer when I met him at an event in Iowa. And then when the debates started, fairly frequently, because we were fairly close for a period of time in our positioning on the stage, Mrs. Carson and her sons would be sitting with Mary Pat and my children. And so we all got to know each other pretty well. He's not only a really wonderful guy and a great American, but he's got a great family. And Mrs. Carson and their sons are really, really very nice people. And the kind of people that if we weren't running, we'd want to spend some time with. I cannot say that about everyone on the stage, and I suspect neither can Dr. Carson. But we can say that about each other, and so it's good to see you, Mrs. Carson, and good luck tonight to you and to Ben. And thank you all of you. Please all caucus tonight. I'd love you to all caucus for me, except for Mrs. Carson. I'd like you all to caucus for me, but please caucus nonetheless, whether you caucus for me or not. We need to have as many voices involved in this process as possible. And Iowa needs to send a very strong message to the rest of the country about what your preferences are and the people that you like. And so I think it's really important for you to get out there and do it. That's why I came this afternoon. I came to see a group of young Republicans because, you know, you need to have your voices heard as well. Not just those who are retired, not just those who are already well deep into their professional career. You need to have your voices heard as well. So please make sure you go there tonight, have your voices be heard. And I look forward to the results tonight because we're finally going to have something to talk about other than polls and fundraising. We're actually going to have people who are going to actually vote to talk about, and that'll be good. So thank you all of you for having me today. I appreciate all the time and attention you've given me over the last year in Iowa. We all appreciate it, and like I said, by tonight we'll all be off your telephones and off your TV sets, so you'll be through with us at least until August when we come back here to try to make sure Hillary Clinton doesn't win Iowa so that we win the presidency. Thank you all for coming. Thank you guys. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
You had lunch